Man, it's so nice to see you again. Near that great blue pool in LA. And I closed my book, moved my bag, made some space. Cause it's time to give that sun a break. So tell me now, these few years have been. What is living to honor the past? And I have been well, I say through a smile. These feelings, they come and go fast. Light your cigarette, see the fame in your eyes. Sing me the news.
Hello. Welcome to the show Force Majeure. For those of you who don't also know and love the artist Vanessa Carlton, then I wrote that song. Hello, I see people signing on from Omaha and Nashville. Hi, Jacqueline. And New York, and what's up from Anaheim? Hello. I'm in Minneapolis, and it's a mean, dark, rainy, electrical storm here. So if the lights flicker, it's just a run-of-the-mill chaos. Nothing infrastructural. Okay, while you find your seats this time around, you can, as always, find your assigned seating on the reverse of your ticket. Yeah, usually I share a couple sciencey facts. Today I just thought I would read verbatim a couple of the data profiles that I had seen online. For those of you who are secure in a partnership, you know, just let you know what you're missing. Suitor number 1 beneath his image says, willing to date someone from anywhere, as long as eventually you'd be willing to move to Tucson to be with me. Dating pool seems limited here. I can't move away for at least 12 years. Okay. Suitor number 2. Power loves power. You will need physical strength and stamina to be with me. Period. Okay. Today, I'm going to begin with a new poem, and it's called "How Long Have I Been Alive?" And if you're unsure of how long you've been alive, this is a simple and easy to follow guide that might help you arrive at an answer. If you can hold a Cheerio between your index finger and your thumb in what's commonly called the pincer's grasp, you are at least 9 months old. If your body has kneecaps that are made entirely of cartilage, you are less than 3 years old. If you can distinguish between behavior and intent, you are at least 4 years old. If you can recognize puns when you hear them, you are probably at least 6 years old. If your kneecaps have fused completely into bone, you're probably at least 10 years old. If you can detect a tone at 17,400 hertz, you are probably under 18 years old. If you are pregnant, or think you might be pregnant, you are old enough to know that fear and love rarely travel anywhere without the other. If you are shorter than you once were, you're probably over 40. If you can see the floating towers in the distance, brought into automatic focus by the silicate disc in your prosthetic eye, then I am long dead, and you are older than I can imagine. Double check your kneecaps now if you need a moment. They're at the front of the elbow of your leg. Cheers. What a long week / life, yeah? I am toasting something kind of special today, in that I just got a negative result for my very first COVID-19 test. What a fantastic test to fail. For those of you who live in Minnesota, surprisingly easy to go and get one. The State Department here recommended that anybody who'd been involved in like the protests or the vigil get swabbed to make sure that they weren't inadvertently or vertently, I suppose, carrying COVID-19. And it was way easy. Did a drive-through thing, tilt your head back, and they don't touch your brain or anything. They go to right here, sort of where your stress lives during a minor panic attack. And they take a couple of quick swabs. They run it in 2 or 3 days. You've got your results. So if you were involved in any of the events here in Minnesota, highly recommend. They did a good job, and it's free. It's free. Thanks for the congrats. Salut! Also, after having gotten my negative test result, I felt confident and emboldened to see my dad for the first time in many, many months. So today, my dad and his wife Leslie and I met on a picnic bench in Minneapolis. And my dad gave me this bottle of wine. Dad, I think I saw that your wife Leslie, who knows how to use Instagram, logged on. Thanks for the wine. It's delicious. I have to get a thing on the table behind me. Hang tight. Okay. This time around, I'm going to be reading a couple of excerpts from my book, which is called My Own Devices. Yeah? We're going to do a two-parter because we've got the 8 p.m. clap that's going to bifurcate this reading. Vocab day. Actually, the word bifurcate is on my mind because I've been reading about kneecaps all day to try to get those lines right. And it turns out that, your kneecaps are real squishy and soft, and they're that kind of bone that exists kind of nestled in a tendon. So it's not connected to other bones. It lives in its own little house made out of tendon. It's named after a sesame seed. I think it's a samosa. Nope, that's a delicious snack, but it's something like that. Semasoid. And they're real soft when you're little because, they're your knees are your feet. You got to crawl. But as you get older, they calcify, they ossify, they turn to bone. And it turns out that process by which they ossify, can actually begin like in several loci, meaning several parts of the kneecap can begin to turn to bone. So that every once in a while you get a kid where the bone doesn't completely fuse and they've got a bifurcated kneecap or a kneecap in 2 parts, much like this reading. Ready? Real Trump at the moment. Shit's upside down. What a tool. I tour a lot with my group, Doomtree, the group of which I'm a part, and a lot of the book that came out a couple of years ago that I wrote talks about like just touring life, all the moments in between, those that are illuminated by stage lights. The downtime, lots of fun, lots of fatigue, lots of joy, lots of glory, lots of pain, lots of boredom. And probably like every band, we spend a good chunk of our time playing Would You Rather. All of the games of your like early grade school years return by the time you're a touring musician. This essay is called Milk. The trick to formulating a good would you rather question is finding the fulcrum of pain. You've got to balance the question right there at the point at which both alternatives seem equally unconscionable. There's a particular show in Madison, Wisconsin, like 5 hours from where I live, where we had a lot of downtime before we hit stage. And so I asked the guys in the crew this would you rather question. I asked the group, would you rather be submerged in a bathtub full of kombucha, milk, or marinara sauce? For how long? One of the dudes asked. Like 15 minutes, half an hour. Can I wear a condom? Sure. I thought this question might be a non-starter. I was already thinking of ways to modify it. But to my surprise, a couple of the guys picked kombucha. Ew, really? Yeah, said Paper Tiger, and he did a little shimmy. Bubbles, man. But milk is clearly the correct answer, I said. Cleopatra bathed in milk. The phrase milk and honey conveys luxury and decadence. Lotion is practically just thick milk. It wasn't even a good question because the answer is so obviously milk. X, my ex-boyfriend, who'd long been considering the alternatives, piped up with his answer. Marinara. At least one set of eyes rolled. Some crew members suspected that this was a purely contrarian answer, but I wasn't so sure. In almost all dimensions, X is an unusual dude. There was an outpouring of anti-marinara sentiment. It'd be impossible to rinse off. It's acidic. The only time people ever willfully submerge themselves in a tomato base, let alone a meaty sauce, is because they've been skunked. We waited to see if he would reconsider. And X has this particular way of screwing up his face that wrinkles his nose. It's a charming, boyish expression, and I think he knows it's a charming and boyish expression because sometimes he does it in press photos. I think I just like marinara. So X and I had been trying to work ourselves out for a lot of years. Like if our relationship was a person, it would have been in 6th grade by then. A lot of years of trying to sort our shit out. And we had eventually gone to a marriage counseling session even to see if we had a shot at working through it. And this marriage counselor, she put a throw pillow on the floor and she told me to direct all of my anger into this throw pillow. And I remember directing all of my anger into that woman. It felt so hopeless. It felt so hopeless. And at one point, X brought me a copy of this book, which may be familiar to some listeners. It's called The Ethical Slut. And it's essentially like a how-to guide to polyamory. How to date more than one person at a time without being a jerk. Being open and honest about that. I wasn't stoked on that gift at all. But I came across this online interview between Amanda Palmer, another musician, a big and famous musician, and her man, Neil Gaiman, who's a very famous writer of fantasy and science fiction. And I found out while reading that interview that Neil and Amanda, who I had met a couple times at art gigs, were polyamorous. And the way that they talked about it seemed so compassionate. Ready? Pause. It's time for 8 p.m. Now's the time when we go. Oh, shoot. I was supposed to hide the dirty. Nothing. Okay. Now I just set you against my kosher box of salt. We open up the window. And we clap quickly as a quick expression of thanks to all the frontline workers. Thank you. Neil and Amanda. So Neil and Amanda, when they were talking about the way that their relationship worked, like the actual mechanics of polyamory, it sounded so different than I thought that it might. So different. And they did a Q&A about it with their respective fans. Online, when fans asked about the mechanics of the relationship between Amanda and Neil, he responded, well, it works okay currently because we have people we can kiss all over the world. If we both lived in a small town and never left, we might decide it was easier to have a closed relationship. Or we might not. We talk and talk and talk and hug a lot and talk some more and then do whatever needs to be done in the real world. That all sounded so reasonable and compassionate. Not at all like the powder-headed love junkies in my imagination. And I wondered, was this the sort of polyamory that I could or should consider if it might allow me to have a lasting relationship with X? It seemed like either the most pathetic or the most woke course of action a woman can take. All right, so use your brain, I thought. And I took an inventory. I had 5 big reservations about polyamory. I wrote them all down and I tried to consider each in turn. Number one, my gut said that monogamy has moral virtue. That's just how love is best done. Well, guts say a lot of things. And throughout the course of human history, guts have been epically, disastrously wrong, particularly when they're aligned with prevalent cultural attitudes that have outlasted their utility. Maybe this monogamy thing is just the vestige of a medieval Judeo-Christian moral code, more concerned with property rights than romantic intimacy. And even if monogamy was somehow natural to us, that wouldn't make it morally right. Among a lot of primates, cannibalism is natural too. Number 2, if my dude loved someone else, there'd be less of him for me. If love were a Snickers bar, this would be true. But when a mother has a second child, we don't presume that she can only love her first kid half as much. It's not necessarily a zero-sum game. Love wells up new when you meet someone who's precious to you. Number 3, polyamory is terrifying. What if he meets someone he likes more and he leaves me for her? That is totally possible. But if a partner genuinely stands a better chance at a real lasting happiness with someone else, wouldn't the loving thing be to let them go? Polyamory or not, the idea of chasing smart, funny, attractive women out of the yard, lest they make my guy happy, sounds like a lousy way to live. Number 4, being someone's sole romantic partner makes me feel special. That's true. But also lame. Why would my happiness hinge on feelings that my partner doesn't have for someone else? On the other hand, maybe monogamy is just a baked-in inherited preference. Like, hello, I have brown eyes and type O blood, and I want to form a life bond with only one dude who wants to form a life bond with only one me. On the other hand, maybe it's just one of many possible learned modes of expression, like English. And if so, is it something that I could unlearn for a fuller experience? It's hard to tell what's native and what's socialized. It's like trying to taste your own tongue. Number 5, I am totally unwilling to define polyamory to my dad at Thanksgiving. I'm entirely too square to go around telling people I'm sleeping with a bunch of dudes at the same time. A lot of people are privately poly, but I don't have the wherewithal for a double life. And although I admire the zero fucks given attitude of my radical friends, I give plenty of fucks. I hand them out like perfume samples at the mall, in fact. I care what my family thinks, what colleagues think, what passing strangers and the children in their strollers think. Telling my parents that I am seeing more than one guy would be excruciatingly uncomfortable. And it would be almost unimaginable to tell them that my boyfriend was seeing other women. I can picture my father's face, hurt by and for me, questions sinking through him like arrows fired from all directions. My family members have undermined the institution of marriage through conventional channels by separation and divorce. But of course, there was this lasting would you rather. Would you rather have a spectacular love with an unusual man and share him with other people, or wait for an ordinary love that you get to keep all for yourself? People change religions for one another. They renounce citizenships, adopt children. They lose weight. They take new names. Almost anything about a person can change. For $5K, there's a company that will laser the brown out of your eyes, revealing the blue iris beneath. The blood type of a little girl with rubella changed from A to O. Meadow voles are naturally promiscuous, but if you juice up their little vole brains with high levels of a protein called the vasopressin receptor, they begin to behave like prairie voles, monogamists that pair for life. But even presuming I could go poly, was I even allowed to make that sort of compromise for a man? Like, which feminist street gang would jump me for my membership card first? The one that's mad that I conceded so much for a dude, or the one that's mad that I'm not sex positive enough to be out there balling other dudes already? I met with X, and we talked about it. We walked through the park, made compelling cases on both sides of the argument for reconciliation for another try. If we failed, we might lose our friendship and subject ourselves to even more pain. But the stakes seemed so high not to try. But no matter how we maneuvered the question, the scales held perfectly level. It was impossible to decide. We punted. We wouldn't try now, but in the future maybe. Maybe when we're 40, he said. Maybe he'll like white wine by then. We'll live together. We'll sort all this out. And part of me wanted him to insist that we jump in headlong, but no part of me was willing to instigate that sort of headlong jumping by myself. So we left the park, we had a sad hug, we walked to our respective cars, and we camped out on our fulcrum, living undecided for a very long time. At family holidays, when my dad and his brothers are running down the greatest hits of their boyhood anecdotes, I often request that somebody tell the one about the salamander and the milk. When my dad was a boy, he caught a salamander. He took it home, and he set it up in a little terrarium with leaves and twigs to simulate the whole of nature. He promptly fell in love with it in the way that kids love to play house with wild things. And that night, when his mother served dinner for him and his brothers, he pushed away from the table and ran to the terrarium. "What about Sal? I bet he's hungry too." He went to the refrigerator to find something to serve for dinner. He pulled out a carton from the fridge and went back to the salamander's cage and gently picked him up by the hinge of his jaws. The salamander hung like a test tube, body slack, mouth open. My dad was so unsure of the answer that he hadn't realized there was a question. With a steady hand, total concentration, and the blunt tool of his own tenderness, he carefully filled his salamander with milk. He then took his place at the table, smiling and self-satisfied, because that is how love is supposed to be done. Okay, I'm just reading the comments. What the hell are you guys talking about? I feel like I get a live show. I know when someone's texting or whispering to a friend, I feel like I turned around and the entire class was out of control. What are you talking about? Let's do a little bit of housekeeping. I got so excited by the company and the art that I forgot to talk about tonight's beneficiaries. As is always the case, we're doing a little fundraiser today. This show is free. So if you're sorting through your own personal budget, keep your dollars in your pockets and your wallets closed. Don't sweat it. If you've got a little extra scratch to be able to devote to a good cause, today I'm raising money for two organizations, one in Minneapolis and one in New York. The one in Minneapolis is called the Northside Achievement Zone. They work in North Minneapolis, which is traditionally like a community of color, and they do really badass, like long-term, multi-year partnerships with families and students, helping kids get access to early childhood education and then tracking how that affects their third grade reading levels. Minnesota has this shameful like achievement or opportunity gap here, and so they do a lot of work to combat that. Badasses. Okay, I'm going to now ask our graphics guy to just slide in the Venmo. Perfect, the Venmo information. If you're inclined to give directly to the Northside Achievement Zone, please do. You can find them very easily online. If it's easier to give here to Venmo, awesome. today we've got matching donations, and I'm so excited. Thank you to the few of you who've generously provided funds towards that end. The other organization that I'm fundraising for today is the Food Bank for NYC. I had the opportunity to do a little bit of volunteering for a while in Harlem when I was living in New York. Funny, sweet, kind-hearted gang. They're it's a super dedicated team. Servant leaders like in the best possible way. Okay. Guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging. Before we, gosh, how many people live here? It's just me, right? Where the hell do I put all my shit? Talk amongst yourselves. Where's the thing? Where's the thing? There it is. Okay. Before we close today, can I ask where people are watching from? Specifically, I'm wondering if there are people who are watching from outside the U.S. And the reason I ask is because I'd received a few requests to do one of these shows a little bit earlier in the day so that people in Asia and Europe could tune in. Is that an enormous contingent? Nah, but I thought it was such a sweet ask. So the news for this evening is our Thursday night show of Force Majeures are going to go on hiatus for a while while I write some new stuff. But as a farewell, I'm going to be doing an episode on Saturday. Okay, so we've got Akron. Cool. What's up? What's up, Ohio, NorCal, Portland? Fantastic. My brother just moved to Portland. His name is Max. Please say hello. Oakland. Warsaw. Fantastic. Okay. Denver. Cleveland. This Saturday, I'm going to do a show, and I'm going to do it at 4 p.m. Central. I'll post this online. But even if you're in the U.S. and you want to do a tea party or an early cocktail hour, come and join me then. Thank you guys so much for having spent all of these many nights with me. Appreciate it. One more cheers. Salud, salud. Taylor, in Berlin. I'll see you this Saturday. Let's roll credits, shall we? Very briefly here. Roll credits. If you want to check out the Northside Achievement Zone on Instagram, that's how you do it. Thank you so much to the Food Bank in New York. Hustlers. Such hard work and such good spirits for so long. And of course, Tom, our effects guy. Unsung hero. Tom, I see you and I thank you. Okay, I'll see you on Saturday.